It's perfect. Okay, great. Well, we are live and so excited. We're just going to wait a few minutes for people to join us.
Yay, I'm so excited.
Me
We'll be
too.
talking all about naps today. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to answering people's questions.
Perfect. And let me just check out our Facebook group, make sure everything's working here. Okay, we are live. Perfect. Okay, people are logging on.
Great.
Just giving them a few minutes. So, Katie, how did you get your start as a certified sleep consultant?
So I have 2 kids of my own. I'm very passionate about sleep in general with them as well as for myself. And shortly after having my second baby, coincidentally, I was in the break room pumping one day. I practice part-time as a pediatric nurse practitioner, and I was looking for some other opportunities to expand my career and came across a consulting position with a company many families are familiar with called Hatch Baby. And I ended up doing some consulting work with them in relation to kind of expertise with parenting, sleep, and feeding, and answering parents' questions through an app. And I did that for about 1.5 years. And then after that time frame, I really wanted to be able to offer more in depth and to more families. And so I decided to branch off and start my own business. And with that, I went through the formal sleep certification as well as breastfeeding counselor certification, leading up to starting Well Rested Wee Ones. So in all, I've been doing sleep consulting for about 3 years, but with Well Rested Wee Ones, that started in 2019.
Amazing. Well, now that we have some people on, we'd love to hear a presentation. And here it is. Katie, take it away.
Okay, so I am going to be talking all about naps today. This is by far one of the most popular concerns and one that I get many questions on every day from families when I do my Q&As on social media every month. I'd say over 50% of the questions are about naps. So I'm going to be talking all about naps, whether you have a newborn, a 6-month-old, a 1-year-old, or 2-year-old, 3-year-old, this will apply to you. So I'm excited to dive in. So a little bit about myself. This is me and my 2 kiddos, Bennett and Brock. My oldest one is about to turn 5 and my youngest one just turned 3. Like I said before, I still practice part-time as a pediatric nurse practitioner. I've been a pediatric nurse for 15 years, a nurse practitioner for 7 years. So I have worked with children my entire professional life. I see them every day. I encounter sleep challenges within that practice. And then I have the certification of a baby and toddler sleep coach. That's through the Cradle Coach Academy, and then a breastfeeding counselor certification as well. I live in the Midwest. I'm based out of Kansas City, and I offer services that I can work with families from virtually anywhere. So I work with families both locally and across the US, and I've also worked with a few international families. So when it comes to naps, dive right in and talk about how important naps are. So we all know that sleep is really important for our health, whether it's our mental health, physical health, emotional health. It is so beneficial. The research is out there and it's a really hot topic with babies, toddlers, and adults. So babies really need to have naps during the day. What naps do are they help to enhance learning. They need a break throughout the day because they're practicing skills during those awake periods of time. So it really helps to restore them for those short periods of time when they're napping. It helps with our mood and better emotional regulation. So many parents will take note that if their baby isn't napping well or their toddler isn't napping well, that they're going to see an increase in fussiness, more tantrums, a harder time regulating emotions. And so that can really be due to the fact that they're not getting the sleep that they need. And then naps also have been shown to support night sleep. So if we have a baby that is not napping very well during the day, it's more likely that our nighttime sleep is not going to be great. So those two go hand in hand, and that's why it's so important to be recognizing that your baby needs to take those naps throughout the day and not overextend them. And sometimes with multiple caregivers, everybody kind of has a different perspective on when babies should nap and how they should nap. But just having everybody on the same page, you guys will have the tools after this discussion today to kind of set the tone for naps and get your baby napping better. So when it comes to the key to naps, there's two main things that I am looking for to find like the sweet spot for your baby and naps. And that is wake windows and sleepy cues. And I'm going to go into that in more detail here in the future. But wake windows are essentially the amount of time that your baby is awake between naps, and sleepy cues are signs that your baby is giving you that they are ready for sleep. And those are something that you can start looking at from day one. As soon as you bring baby home from the hospital, you want to be watching those wake windows and looking for sleepy cues, because an overtired baby is much harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. And if you've struggled to get your baby down for a nap, you know exactly what I'm talking about there. Okay. So wake windows, like I said, wake windows are really referencing the maximum amount of time that your baby should be awake for their current age. So awake time helps to build sleep pressure and support those naps and overnight sleep. Naps are more challenging because we don't have hormones in our favor during the day to help with our sleep. When we're talking about hormones, what I'm talking about is things like melatonin production. So at night, melatonin is produced by our brain and tells our body that it's time to sleep. During the day, we don't have that in our favor. So it's all about those wake windows and building sleep pressure. So you are kind of gauging how much time your baby needs before they can fall asleep. If we put them down too soon, then they're not going to have enough sleep pressure, and it's going to take them a long time to fall asleep. They may play in their crib, they may cry in their crib, whatever it may be. If we push them too far, they're also going to have a hard time falling asleep, and that's where you're more likely to see the crying. So with wake windows, they are going to increase fairly gradually throughout the first year. We're kind of talking about 15 minutes, give or take, each month that your baby can tolerate a little bit more awake time. And so what I generally recommend to parents and families is that each month you really need to be taking a look at your baby's nap schedule, routine, how long is it taking them to fall asleep, how long are they napping for, and reevaluate to determine if we need to make some changes, because babies go through a lot of changes in the first year of life. And if we're not meeting them with that and knowing that they're going through those changes, we're going to see more nap difficulties. Okay, so like I said, each month is where I say, take a look at your baby's schedule. So these are kind of some sample wake windows of going over the course of a few months. So when we're talking about a newborn, we're looking at somewhere between like 30 and 45 minutes of awake time before they need a nap. And that includes their feeding time. So many new parents are unaware that a baby needs to sleep quite that often and feel like they might be able to stay up for 1 to 2 hours at a time. And that's where you're really going to encounter that fussy newborn period. So those newborn wake windows are quite small. As we're getting into like month 2, month 3, we can see a little bit longer, maybe close to an hour to 75 minutes, give or take. Again, that includes feeding time. And in those first couple of months, babies do take longer to feed because they're just getting the hang of it and learning those skills. So still, by the time you feed your baby, have a little bit of floor time with tummy time, do a diaper change, you're turning around and putting them back down for a nap. So it can be quite the cyclical eat, play, sleep is generally what I'm recommending with that. And then as we're getting closer to months 4 through 6, we're seeing closer to like 90 to 120 minutes. And then 6 months and beyond, we're seeing like 2 to 3 hours of awake time. And then as your baby is getting closer to a year and we're emerging on like a one nap type of schedule, that's where babies can stay awake for closer to 4 to 5 hours, which is a much longer stretch if you look back to months before in terms of how long they can stay awake. And that's where feeding patterns are going to change. They're becoming much more mobile and they need a lot more playtime to build that sleep pressure and fall asleep more easily.
We do have a question, Katie.
Okay.
And this is from Lynn, and she has a 2-month-old, and she's starting to sleep on her side, and she's asking if it's safe.
Okay, so this is pretty common to see around 2, 3, 4 months, is that your baby's becoming a little bit more mobile and starting to roll in one or both directions. So when your baby is starting to roll onto their side, it is safe, but you need to start taking your baby out of the swaddle, because if your baby is starting to roll, it's no longer safe to be in the swaddle for sleep. And as much as we want to continue to help with sleep, knowing that the swaddle helps to dampen that startle reflex that wakes up babies, if your baby is doing that in the swaddle, it's time to transition out. So there's a couple of options for that. You can start taking one arm out of a time out of each swaddle, or you can use like a swaddle transition item like a Magic Merlin suit or something along those lines that can help prevent rolling, because babies at 2 months aren't necessarily purposefully rolling yet. It's more just a behavior that starts to happen and they really can't navigate that on their own. So it's something just to be aware of with safe sleep practices.
And do you, in your experience, so I know I use the Ollie, which is like this Velcro, and my baby slept so well in it. And then, of course, taking that away from her was just like a nightmare. She was not thrilled. And we did the Magic Merlin, but I also got, you know, you get a ton of advice, but you're the expert. So is it better to have those transition sleep sacks, or just like cold turkey, go without anything and get them used to it, you know, sooner?
I don't think that I can't say one size fits all for that, because some babies at that 2 to 3 month mark still have that really strong startle reflex, but they're showing a lot of that rolling, and it's just not safe to keep them in the swaddle anymore. But if you're putting them like in a sleep sack where you take the arms out and they are waking up so much more frequently than what they were, that's where I'd probably go to a transitional item. I think we just all have to be aware that those, whether it's a swaddle, it's a Merlin suit or something like that, inevitably it has to be taken away at some point. And so yes, the longer you hold on to it, the more your baby is going to become used to that and kind of be dependent on that. And so I don't like to hold on to things for too long, but certainly in those first couple months, it can really be beneficial. Although I will say I've had 3-month-olds and 4-month-olds that we go straight from the swaddle to both arms out. And usually it takes about a week, give or take, depending on the baby and their temperament and things like that. But it's very normal to see sleep disturbances no matter how old your baby is when you make those transitions.
And for me, as a first-time mom, it just, and I don't know why it was like this hurdle of like having nothing in her crib, no swaddle. It just seemed strange. Like we have our blankets and our pillows. And I think I've seen on your Instagram about the importance of introducing a lovey. I'm not sure if that's in this presentation, but when would you introduce a lovey? And have you seen that sort of provide comfort for babies when they're in this transition?
Right. So as far as introducing a lovey, I follow the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations for safe sleep and waiting until age 1 to introduce that, because there's a risk that it can be put on your baby's face when they're younger than that, and that's increasing risk of SIDS. So we're not wanting to do that before age 1. But what I will say is when you do offer and introduce a lovey, especially at that age 1, between age 1 and 2, it can provide a lot of comfort and security for those toddlers. And not all of them are going to take to it right away by any means, but you could introduce it earlier than 1 year in terms of like when you're feeding your baby, and it can be something that they can hold on to and really start to make the connection that it's there for comfort. Or if your baby is crying and upset, you can come and pick them up and kind of hold it against them so that they can make that association that it's a calming type of mechanism. So that can be beneficial even before that first birthday, so that then when you hit that first birthday, you can start using it for sleep, and know that it will provide more comfort. And it can also help, like definitely with naps, when you're going through sleep regressions, separation anxiety, and early morning wake-ups, which that's another hot topic with the sleep world.
Early morning wake-ups is where I'm living right now, with my daughter waking up at like 4:30 or 5. But I do want to address Celine's question, which is, when transitioning out of a swaddle or transitional sac, is it best to do this during naps or at night?
So again, no one size fits all, but what I would say is, if you're doing that transition, it's worthwhile to try it for a couple of naps during the day. You can kind of gauge how your baby is going to react. Are they waking themselves up immediately after 10 minutes? Is it really making that much of a disruption? But something else that I like to talk about too is when I'm reverting back and how I was talking about the melatonin production and how that helps with sleep so much at night. Sometimes I will just do it at night from the get-go, just knowing that sleep in general overnight is going to come together faster in comparison to naps. So naps are just always more challenging, no matter what the age, in terms of like seeing them lengthen and seeing consistency. Whereas when we start to work and try and improve and consolidate overnight sleep, that tends to come together much faster. So again, no right or wrong there. But if you're home with your baby during the day, like trying the first nap of the day out of the swaddle can be a good option to try and kind of see how they react.
Got it.
Somebody else has a 4:30 riser.
Find me on Instagram. I'm up. I mean, I don't want to derail your presentation, but is there something you can do about early rising?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a whole nother presentation.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind though is, and it's just right around the corner, in 2 to 3 weeks is daylight savings time. We're going to spring forward. So that can actually be a really beneficial time for parents who have early risers to try and reshift and reset that circadian rhythm to get to a little bit later. And I have a blog post coming out. Email subscribers will be getting the link to that soon. So all of you who are here today, just make sure you subscribe so that you can be in the know and how to help prepare. And again, early rising, hot topic. I talk all about it on Instagram because it and the naps are definitely by far the most. But if your naps are off and you extend your baby too much, it's a contributing factor for early rising. So I'm always looking at daytime schedule to try and determine, is there something contributing to that early rising? Because it is lots of pieces to the puzzle with that.
Perfect. And we will drop all of Katie's information in the chat so you can find her, but we'll let you keep going with those baby cues.
Okay, perfect. So this is really more focusing on newborns in this slide, but it is something that we're continuing to be aware of throughout those first few months. And babies have tired signs. These are some of the classics that you're going to see when your baby's rubbing their nose or their eyes. They're turning in towards your chest. They're kind of dazing off, glazing off, like looking off to the side. And crying is typically a late sign. The thing is these signs can actually be really similar to hunger signs. And so that is why I love trying to follow an eat, play, sleep type of routine. And I know that doesn't always work 100% of the time, but that can really help you eliminate and determine what my baby needs. Because if you feed them upon waking up, you know that you're meeting the hunger, those signs. Then you're going to have your playtime. And so now you're going to start looking for those tired signs next. And so that's where wake windows come into play, and then starting to look out for these signs. And again, not every baby is going to show these classic tired signs. So you're going to get to know your baby in those first few months and kind of determine what's going to work best for them. But I will tell this to newborn parents quite frequently, like, set your timer on your phone or your watch for like 45 or 60 minutes. And when it goes off, look at your baby and see how they're acting. See if they're showing you any signs, because sometimes we're busy during the day. We're doing laundry, we're emptying whatever it may be. You might have another child in the home and you lose track of time. And then you've already passed that like sweet spot for a nap. So that's something that like in those early days can be really helpful to try and find the sweet spot for your baby and help you with your baby accepting naps for sure. Oops. Okay. So short naps. It's what you're all here for, right? So short naps are just so common. They're really developmentally quite appropriate and normal in those first few months of life, really until possibly 5 to 6 months. It's not unusual to see a baby taking short naps. And when I'm referring to a short nap, it's usually something that's less than one sleep cycle. So one sleep cycle is usually like 45 to 50 minutes. So lots of us have a baby that is like 32 minutes on the dot and they're waking up, or 27 minutes, you barely got your shower and like scarfed in some lunch and then they're awake again. So I'm going to dive more into short naps, but just know that short naps are normal. It's part of the developmental process to get to a longer nap. And because your baby does need to sleep so frequently throughout the day, it's part of that process too. So you're not alone if you have a short napper by any means. So when we're talking about finding the sweet spot for your naps and tips to get longer naps. So what I'm wanting to see happen to be able to optimize your ability to get your baby to nap longer. We want the perfect room environment. So when I'm talking about that, after you're out of the newborn period, I'm really talking about like a very dark cave-like room that has some white noise and potentially a fan, so dark that you really can't even see your hand. And that, again, because we don't have that melatonin production in our favor, darkness will signal to your baby that it's time to sleep. If we have too much light peeking in, that can contribute to a short nap and, again, like those early morning wake-ups. Starting a nap time routine is also really important. So a nap time routine is essentially like a bedtime routine, but just a condensed and shorter version. It doesn't need to be anything elaborate. It just needs to be something to cue to your baby that it's time to sleep. Their babies' brains will make connections really quickly if you start on routines from day one. So what I'm looking for in like a nap time routine is something like maybe a book or a song. Put in your sleep sack or swaddle, turn on your white noise, kiss goodnight, and lay them down. It doesn't have to be anything much more than that, just a couple of minutes. Looking at those wake windows again, making sure your baby's not waking out of hunger. So are they taking those full feeds? And then removing sleep props, sleep props are referencing things like rocking to sleep, holding to sleep, feeding to sleep, replacing the pacifier. And those are all things that I start working towards after 4 months with families, because that is one of the #1 reasons why sleep is disturbed, overnight wake-ups, short naps, and things like that.
So I also feel like this is something that's been really hard for me, which is #1, trying to get baby down without the bottle. And #2, putting baby down, like maybe not totally asleep.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so those feeding to sleep is a very big sleep association for many babies. That sucking, and it naturally makes them more drowsy for the most part. So it depends on how long the habit has been in place. Regardless, whether it's a 4-month-old or a 1-year-old, we want like bottles and breast for nutrition and not for sleep. They are going to look for those same types of interventions if they wake up at the 20-minute mark from a nap or a 40-minute mark from the nap to help them fall back asleep. Same thing overnight. If they wake up and all they know how to do is sleep with a bottle in their mouth or a breast in their mouth, they're going to look for a similar intervention. And so it's not necessarily because they need that nutrition in the middle of the night. Obviously, every baby's different, but it just causes those sleep disruptions. So that's where like the eat, play, sleep routine can really be helpful. So starting that early, and not having that feeding to sleep association. But if you do have that, starting to take the bottle out or the breast out before your baby falls fully asleep, and then drowsy but awake works for some babies, but for many parents, they shake their head and say that's just absolutely impossible. There's no such thing as putting them down drowsy but awake. And so that's where like implementing some sort of sleep training can be really helpful, because we want to be able to lay baby down in the crib, and them learn how to put themselves to sleep without any other outside intervention from us. And it is a process. Babies are capable of learning this after 4 months. The longer sleep habits are in place, the longer it takes to transition away, but by no means is it something that at a certain age I say can't happen. Any baby, toddler, or even preschool child can learn healthy sleep habits and to learn to sleep independently.
So you're telling us there's hope.
There's definitely hope. There's hope for everyone.
Perfect.
Okay, so with the short naps, like I said, there's just so many contributing factors. We want that room set up, the age, as I talked about, really under that 4 or 5 month mark. We're still seeing short naps fairly commonly. If we don't have the routine in place, the sleep props, hunger, and overtired and undertired. And those wake windows really come into play when we're looking at the short naps, because I'm gonna go to the screen. Here are this would be one I would like screenshot or save or reference back to, because this can be a sign that you've missed the mark with your baby or you need to make an adjustment. So if your baby's overtired, what you're going to be seeing is your baby is going to be waking up from a short or long, or even a long nap, typically crying. They're going to fall asleep as soon as you put them down in the crib and still take a short nap. And many parents think that putting your baby down and them falling asleep like that is like the golden ticket, but it actually means that they're usually a bit overtired. So that's where you might need to shave off a little bit of time, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes potentially, to see if that helps with them and to fall asleep. I'm looking for like 5 to 10 minutes to fall asleep for a nap. Maybe not quite that long for some older babies, but that's just something to keep in mind, that it's a natural process to fall asleep, as you or I would if we put our head on the pillow. It's going to take us a couple minutes before we actually fall into sleep. You know, we have our own kind of mental wind down routine. So then if I'm looking and seeing somebody like a baby potentially is undertired and you need to lengthen the wake windows. So what you're going to see behavior wise is your baby's going to go down potentially easily for a nap. And then they're going to wake up after maybe 30 or 40 minutes and they're going to be happy, playing in their crib, content, no big deal. Like, I'm good to go. And that's usually meaning that they could have used a little more sleep pressure to build up and take a longer nap. Also, if your baby is taking longer to fall asleep for a nap and they're in their crib just happy playing, practicing skills, things like that, that means that they could have used a little bit more awake time and playtime before we put them down for a nap. So these are like good things to be evaluating every month to see if you're in the right spot for your baby.
We do have a question from Darlene.
Mm-hmm.
She said, my 2-month-old sleeps through the night and has been for a while. Darlene, that's amazing. She can get fussy during the day. So how does that impact those wake windows?
So if she's sleeping through the night, that's great. If she's getting fussy during the day, like I said, you want to kind of look at how long you're keeping her awake. One thing to keep in mind, I'll just say about a 2-month-old, is around like 6 to 8 weeks, around that 2-month age, is typically the peak in crying and fussy behavior. Mm-hmm. So knowing that and the baby's age, it doesn't necessarily mean something is off with naps. It's just generally like a developmental, it's kind of the first regression in sleep. And a lot of parents will think that something is wrong or off with their baby at that age. It usually lasts 5 to 7 days, give or take, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. But if it were to continue on much longer than that, that's where I'd start to look at how long am I keeping them awake? Potentially, do I need to even shave off 5 minutes or 10 minutes before I put them down and see if that helps a little bit with their behavior while they're awake.
Perfect. Great advice. And we also have a question from Michaela. My baby just turned 6 months, will breastfeed and then fall asleep while feeding. But as soon as I go to put him down, he wakes up. Do you have suggestions or tips keeping him asleep or having him not rely on feeding to put him asleep? I know we kind of addressed this a little bit, so
Yeah.
I'll let you answer, but.
Yeah. So with this, so this is a feeding to sleep association, and for babies, it can work really well for a number of months. It could work throughout your entire breastfeeding relationship, potentially. But many parents will come across a time where I used to be able to feed my baby to sleep and put them down and they would stay asleep. And now all of a sudden they're waking up as soon as I put them down, or I have to do it 3 times. I have to keep putting them back on the breast to get them to fall asleep, and I repeat it. So that's a sign to me that the feeding to sleep isn't working for your baby anymore. And so my recommendation when you're seeing these behaviors is that's where we want to work towards the independent sleep skills so that we don't have to feed them to sleep. So I start with bedtime, with learning how to fall asleep independently and initiating sleep on their own at bedtime, and work through that first before I go to naps. And so there's a variety of different sleep training methods that you can use to help with that. And you can do it in a gradual process, but that's the goal that would help you start to see improvement with the naps and not having to do that over and over again to get them to accept a nap. And I help families with that primarily all the time, with feeding to sleep and improving naps and bedtime and overnight.
Amazing.
Okay, so number of naps by age. So these are just general references here, but something that I'm looking at when I'm working with a family, and just kind of guidelines for parents to look at to know, is my baby on an age appropriate type of napping schedule? So in that newborn period, babies are really napping so frequently that there's not necessarily a set number of naps that we're looking towards. But when we get to that 3 to 5 month mark, we're looking for about 4 naps a day. Usually by month 5, we're pretty well transitioned or transitioning to 3 naps a day. And a 3 nap a day schedule is going to go from about 5 months to 7 to 8 months, give or take. A 2 nap schedule, we're usually getting there by 7 to 8 months, occasionally a little bit earlier. And then 2 naps, most likely is going to take you through 13 to 15 months. There are some babies that will stay on 2 naps a bit longer. And then a 1 nap schedule is something that is usually after the first birthday, around that 13 to 15 month mark, and takes you through to about 3 years. The majority of toddlers still need a nap during the day until age 3. Some will even nap until age 5. So it's just variable on, is it impacting overnight sleep? Are you seeing early morning wake ups because your baby takes a nap? Is bedtime getting pushed back too late when your baby takes a nap? And some, when you transition out of the crib into a toddler bed, you'll see more nap resistance there, just because they have more freedom to get in and out of their bed. And that's where really having those firm but loving boundaries can help hold on to the nap if you feel like your baby needs it. And so with that, I do have a downloadable resource that is really helpful for parents to kind of know what to expect at each age. I have monthly schedule guides that give sample wake windows by each month. They give sample schedules by age, number of naps, how much daytime sleep is recommended for that age. And it goes from ages 3 months to 13 months. So that's going to take you from 4 naps to 3 naps and down to 2 naps. And then after that, you'd be transitioning to 1 nap. And those are all, that guide is available to download on my website. And then I also have a freebie that you can download as well. This is your steps to drop a nap. So naturally, when we're going through those transition periods where we're going from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 naps, a nap transition takes anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And so this freebie that you can download provides you with the steps on how to go about that as smoothly as possible. And the services, I touched on this at the beginning, but I work with families one-on-one to provide sleep coaching from 4 months to 4 years. So I offer personalized sleep training plans. I look at the whole picture with my pediatric nurse practitioner, breastfeeding counseling, and sleep certification. I really have expertise in all of those areas to know and understand what is impacting your baby's sleep and feeding and development so that we can find what's going to work best for your family and for your baby to improve sleep. I also have breast and bottle feeding consultations and services that I offer. And then I work with a lot of families just for quick consultations, whether it's like a nap regression or introducing solids or introducing a bottle or things like that. And those are options that I have available outside of the sleep training plans. And I love social media. It's my jam. Instagram is my thing. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Well Rested Wee Ones. I love to engage with all my followers and get to know everybody. I do a monthly Q&A where I answer questions for free and answer as many as I can. I engage with all my posts, and I just love connecting with families and parents in all stages of sleep and feeding and whatever it may be. And I share a little bit about my personal life too on social media because I'm a mom and I have 2 little kids of my own, and we go through similar things that all of you guys do as well.
I've got to say, Katie, you are a rock star on social. Please check her out. Well Rested Wee Ones. So many great tips. Her reels are taking off. She's going viral. So we're actually lucky we even got a bit of your time today, Katie.
Yeah. I have more information on my website. You can email me if you need to get in touch with a consultation, and the social media definitely too. I try and touch base with anybody who reaches out. So happy to connect if people have more questions, and I'm happy to answer more questions if you guys have them.
Perfect. Katie, I think we have answered everyone's questions. We are so happy that we had you. This was so informative and so helpful. Katie, if it's possible, if people have questions that they maybe don't want us to publicly talk about, they could drop it in the chat and you can head over to our Facebook and answer them. But we're just so appreciative. We have a comment that says, "Thank you for this. I feel a lot better knowing that I'm not alone in the short nap situation and early morning wake ups." And then just a bunch of people saying thank you.
Yes, no problem. I will come back and check the comments later. So if people have questions, I will try and answer those throughout the day today.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much for having me.